Hi, my name is Robert Shelley with Shelley Law, and my law firm assists physicians with employment contract issues. Today, I'm going to talk about how is tail coverage calculated. As far as the cost is concerned. So, let's first just talk about when a physician would need tail coverage, and then who's responsible for it, and then kind of what the good cost estimate would be. So, first, a physician only needs tail insurance if they have a claims-made policy. So claims-made policy means a claim or a policy has to be in effect when the claim is actually made. So it's possible if a physician terminates a contract that there will be a gap in between the last day that they work for the employer and then the last day that someone can sue them. So in most states, it's called a statute of limitations, so how long someone can sue for. And in most states, it's 2 years. So it's 2 years from when the patient either knows or should have known of the malpractice. That's why there are some incidents that can go beyond 2 years if it would be impossible for the patient to know that some kind of malpractice incident had occurred. So if the physician has a claims-made policy, someone needs to purchase tail insurance. And so in the physician contract, it's going to say who's responsible for it. If it doesn't, that's a problem that needs to be worked out prior to signing the agreement. As far as who pays for it, well, it depends where the physician is employed. So first, if a physician works for like a smaller physician-owned practice, most of the time, the physician is going to be responsible for that tail cost. However, if the physician works for a big hospital network, it's very unlikely the physician will have to pay tail because that hospital network, depending upon the size, will either be self-insured or will always cover the tail for any of the physicians that are employed by them. There is one other instance where the physician would not have to pay tail, and that's if there's an occurrence-based policy. Under an occurrence-based policy, a policy just has to be in effect when the incident occurs, and so that way no tail is needed. The difference between occurrence and claims made is price. So an occurrence policy is usually about 1/3 more expensive than a claims made policy. So you'll pay 1/3 more per year, but then you don't have to pay that big chunk at the end for the tail coverage. And then claims made, obviously cheaper per year. And then when the physician leaves, that tail policy will have to be paid. And that's when that kind of big outlay of cash comes in. So how much does tail insurance cost? When I'm talking to a physician, I'll usually say the best estimate's around 2 times what your annual premium is. However, depending upon the length of time that the physician has been with the employer, it could be either shorter or longer. So I think like the best range is usually between about 150 to 300% of what the annual premium is for that policy. So the annual premium is simply what the employer pays to insure the physician per year. So let's just take primary care, for instance. Like a good rule of thumb, primary care malpractice insurance is usually around $6,000 a year. Now, it also depends on what state you're in, but just like an overall general estimate, we'll just say $6,000. So in this case, let's say the physician's been there 3 years, they terminate the contract, moving on to a new job. Then in that case, the tail cost would be $12,000 or an estimate of $12,000. And then if the physician was responsible to pay for that, then prior to their end, their last day of providing care to that employer, they would have to purchase that policy, show proof of that to the employer, and then they can move on. There are, I guess, 2 scenarios where a physician would not have to pay tail if they were responsible for it. One, they could always get their new employer to pay their old tail. That's called nose coverage. And so they would simply, it'd be like think of it like a signing bonus that the new employer will just pay the old tail. Or if the physician stays with the same insurance company, so, if you're with one insurance company, your new position utilizes the same insurer. In that scenario, they'll generally roll over your old policy into your new one, then you won't have to pay tail. As I said before, most of the time, if you're in a private physician-owned practice, the physician will be responsible for paying tail. Now, there's a couple ways to negotiate this. One, just say to the employer, "I'd like you to pay for my tail." If they're unwilling to do that, another scenario would be to kind of split the cost based upon how long the physician has been there. So I think one good way of doing it is, let's say it's a 4-year term for a contract, then 25% of the tail costs will be covered by the employer for each year that the physician is employed. So if they're employed for 2 years and then they leave, then they would split the tail cost 50-50 with the new employer or with the old employer. That's one way of doing it. This is really important for some specialties, the higher level surgical specialties. OB-GYN can have enormous tail costs, and it absolutely needs to be taken into account. So if the physician is an OB-GYN and they have to pay for all of their tail and they've been there 8 years, they could have a tail cost of $100,000. That is, and it has to be paid all at once. That's a lot of money for almost anyone. So trying to figure out a way to split the cost of the employer is really one of the higher points of negotiation as far as that goes. So anyway, I hope that was helpful as far as kind of how a tail cost is calculated, anywhere between 150 to 300% of your annual premium. The longer you're there, the higher the range. The shorter you're there, the lower the range. Anyway, if you have any questions, you can always contact my firm at the phone number listed below in the description, or you can always reach us to our website, shellylaw.com, CHELLE law.com. Anyway, appreciate you watching the video. Thanks.